All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I am Craig Herndon. A lot of people know me from Boston Virtual Reality, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, not unlike BostonFIG. So we're dedicated to making virtual and augmented reality accessible to the general public. But today I'm representing Digital Precept, which is my own VR studio where we are working on a VR game called Mend. And with that, we basically had to spend the past year in a bit of a hectic state trying to figure out how to do testing remotely. And we wanted to share those insights with you. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into the thick of it. So first off, I want to just let everyone know that this talk is built on another talk and lessons learned from this. So Sai Wise from Absurd Joy, she's an expert in virtual reality, is incredible. You can follow her on Twitter at Cyceratops. So her talk was on virtual reality testing and how just like having someone play and giving them feedback like really wasn't enough. And this talk is actually built on top of that in that it's not really about virtual reality specifically, but more about like the insights that we should be gaining from testing and how we have to treat testing differently in order to truly get meaningful insights from play testing. And so I just want to thank Sai for these insights and that we were able to basically implement that, but we then had to do it remotely. And that's what this talk is apart. It's really adapting the techniques and things that Sai mentioned that were so important for testing virtual reality. But just because it's VR doesn't mean that you're not going to get anything out of it. I specifically wrote this talk that these principles can apply to anyone working on any game. It doesn't have to be a VR game, but I do go into a little bit details about why VR is a little bit harder. But if you really want to understand why, you can just go and watch Sai's talk. So she posts a lot of her things on the Absurd Joy blog, and you can go and check that out. And so one thing is, I feel like everyone's in here. So you're here to tell me how to like learn how to test and do it quicker and save me time, right? And unfortunately, that's not the ask at all. I'm actually asking you to put on some work gear, dig out your mining tools, and really put in real effort into testing. And to do that, you need to change your mindset of how testing is and how it should be done and how it should be operated. And it takes a lot of time to get really good insights from testing. And so I'll be talking a little bit about how the old ways of testing don't really apply or aren't really effective. And you'll find that it can seem like an overwhelming time suck when you talk about what I'm going to suggest, which is making lots and lots of recordings of all your players, and I'll get into why. And having as many people on the team view them. So one of the things from Sai had is like in person, always have 2 developers watching, phones are put away, and you're just like staring at it and it's like, wow, that's a huge time sink, but it's so important to kind of flip the head on what we want to get out of testing. Because by the time the playtest is complete, the player has already communicated everything you need to know. And I feel like for most developers, especially at the indie level, that's when they're like start asking, all right, they played the game, now I'm going to ask for feedback. Well, they just gave you feedback. You just don't know it because you weren't aware to look for it. And that's part of like watching players play, looking at their facial expressions and things like that. So this is just a very key thing to understand, is that while the player is playing is really where you're going to get your key insights. And I feel like there's this like miscommunication in the mindset of playtesting, where we tend to rely on this like retroactive feedback. So I've seen people at PAX East with clipboards and checkboxes, and you have to do a survey after you play the game. And while these things can be useful, poorly written ones can come up with things where like you're asking questions like, hey, did you think the game was fun? Or like right when they take the headset off at PAX, you say, what did you think? What did you like? Were there any issues? And those are the kinds of questions that you ask. And like the insights, I guess, that you get from that is that some users think it's fun and others don't. They might tell you your graphics look good, and that does feel good. And they might say something like,
"How are you?
There's this one mechanic I like, but another player said they did like it. So now you're just not really sure. So none of this is actionable feedback that you really walk away with. And that's the problem with surveys. But you might be like, well, Craig, I got you, because
how's it going?
What this just means that you wrote a really poor survey. You can write a better survey to get better insights. And while you're correct, the problem with surveys is that you're assuming that you know what the outcome of the playtest should be, that you know what you want to get out of the playtest. And one of the quotes from Sai is that humans are monsters, and they will do unpredictable things, is really what it comes down to. Like, you just don't know what to expect from players in a playtest. And because of that, you can't really know beforehand what is going to be the outcome of a playtester, of a playtest. So now let's try and get into the mindset of like what should you be trying to get out. And I think you're like, okay, I'm going to change my mindset. Let's think about this differently. What if I ask, like, what is wrong with my game? What's broken with my game? What's confusing about my game? And like, as I watch them, I'm thinking about these things. What needs to change in my game? Well, these are actually the wrong things to change about. This is just what you want to get out of it, because if you have answers to these questions, it is going to be actionable feedback. But what you actually need is to focus on the player themselves. And that's asking, like, what is disappointing the player? So how do you know if the player is disappointed? Like, you might hear them sigh. You might like see them be frustrated. They might be moving the mouse around because they don't know what to click on. They might be grabbing a bunch of things if they're in VR and looking around. And maybe you'll even see them shrug and be like, I don't know what to do here. And what's fun is in VR, people are so immersed that when they'll even like get down on their knees and do the like, why kind of thing. So those are very obvious moments where you've disappointed someone and you want to fix it.
I think that last year,
so another thing you can try and get at is what is not working based on what the player is trying. So this can be like standard bugs where the player's trying to jump, but when they jump, they instead fall through. So maybe we don't have like a mesh or physics there. So you can get a lot of like engineering kind of things out of this. But they could also be trying to throw something.
How it was actually good for me to be forced.
They're just confused because they're trying to have it hit something, but you actually don't have any reward or any kind of system in place for if they do hit that target or tree, or if they take that coconut and throw it at something, nothing happens. There's no reward there, and they're just kind of confused, like, why is this object here if like I can't do anything with it? Or why when I try and grab that door, it doesn't open? You'll see things where the users will try to interact with your game, and that typically means that you're trying to do something where you're just kind of filling the environment.
That's amazing.
And what you actually need to be doing is provide things in the environment that are communicating something to the player about what they should be doing.
That's wonderful.
And if you're just adding things to the environment to look cool and look pretty, you can often end up confusing the player where you're expecting them to do one thing, but then they do another. And then instead of asking like what needs to change in my game, you really need to be asking what needs to change in order to meet player expectations. And that's like a very loaded kind of thing, but if we go through all of these, that's what it really comes down to, is based on the user's interpretation, the player's interpretation of your game as they go through it.
But ultimately,
how can I make it to where their expectations meet my expectations? You have to meet the player in the middle of the road. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is by testing early and often, even in the gray box, no art.
My partner, Elise,
just throw them right into the thick of things and get testing right away.
Wonderful.
And you'll need a lot of people. So we're talking basically a small army of testers. 50 is a good starting point to have go through and do this. So now you're starting to think like, well, if I'm having 50 people go through, that's a lot. And again, yes, it is. It's a lot. It's a large time sink. That's the main way you're going to figure out like what is confusing. And you need a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. They need people who have never tried VR before. They need people who never played games before. Get your mom to do it. Get your friend's mom to do it. and really like go to communities. So here in Boston, you have the Boston Unity group, BostonFIG, of course, Boston Postmortem, Boston VR. There's all sorts of places. But again, we're talking about in-person playtesting and feedback.
Definitely.
That currently hasn't been possible, and I'll get to that later in this talk. But right now, I really want to focus on how many people are in here,
so many time in
and just how many
rooms.
testers you're going to need. Because not only do you need a wide variety of testers, you need a wide variety of people on your team that are going in, testing, and watching.
I met someone in a Star
because
Wars chat
like
room.
if your level designer is watching someone play, they're going to get a different insight than if the concept artist or 3D modeler or producer are watching someone play.
And I'm like,
and the reason for that is a wide variety of reasons. Is that the level designer is going to be like, well, why are they trying to shake that tree over there? And the artist is being like, well, there should be a call out on the door. Like right now, there's like a yellow there. If we change it to green, it might contrast differently. And basically, everyone will see the problem, which is the user is not seeing the switch or the door that they're supposed to go to or go through. But the solutions that come out of this are going to be different based on who's watching. And it's really by having at least 2 people from your team watch any one given playtest, but have everyone on your team watching playtest and watching other players play. So one person on here that I actually don't have this on the side is our composer. So that's Jonathan Marlin over here. And we have Desmond and Catherine as our 3D modelers.
Oh, no worries. Yeah.
And Justin's our game designer. I'm like half engineer, half producer, and Jonathan's full-on engineer. So like we have a good variety of people with a lot of different skill sets. But when we like go in and watch people and have given them feedback, it's having the entire team go through it is really what to do it. So just having like just your tester doing all of this isn't going to give you the same insights as having the whole team watching people play. And that's why when you do go to conferences, you want to make sure that the full team is going, so they can see like how players are, how they're interacting, are they excited, all those kinds of things that you get by watching people and people watching like as they're playing your game. So the next key thing to get out of this talk is that testing in virtual reality is hard. So this is coming back to some of the things that Sly pointed out, as well as like what I've learned just being in the space for the past like since 2013. So many players have never even experienced the medium before. So you're doing a lot of introducing them to even like how to walk or move, whereas most players can pick up a controller with standard games and can move a joypad around and press X to jump or A to jump, depending on the controller, right? But with VR, it's just very, very different for people. They don't know the grip buttons. You can be telling them like use your index finger and they'll press their thumb. Like people can get very confused very quickly. So there's also this concept that applies to all games, but it's specifically important to VR, which is the Federality Contract, where the player is coming into your game with certain expectations. So remember, one of the insights we wanted to get out is how to align and meet those expectations. So some of that is the communication beforehand. So if you market your game as being very like zombie focused, actually, let's turn that back. So if you market your game as being very serene and calming, and it's like meditating, and then you have a jump out scare with a zombie, like you've broken that Fidelity contract because they're coming into the experience expecting it to be calm, and now you have them fighting zombies, which can be very anxiety inducing. So that's the example of like a Fidelity contract. But basically, the user comes in with their cultural norms and their expectations, and the only way you're going to be able to meet those expectations is testing a variety of people, so you can figure out like what are all the user expectations. And you're not going to get all of them, but by the more people you test, the closer you're going to get to meeting those user expectations about what they're expecting out of your experience and how they understand and read your experience.
That's great.
And yeah, just remember that humans are monsters. They're going to break your game. They're going to do all sorts of things. Awesome. And I keep coming back to that because you just get completely unexpected things from players at all times. And specifically with VR, there's an infinite ways for them to break your game, because rather than just being able to walk around and jump, hit walls and things like that, now they can do their things like put their head through the walls. They can use their hands to throw objects away from themselves, even though it's a key interaction object that they need to get somewhere. And they'll just try and grab things for no reason. It's similar to in normal games where you can you'll get people walking up and pressing X to see, is this interactable? But now they're like shaking it, so they're putting a lot more effort into it. So the disappointment is greater, which is why it's more important to make sure that you give some sort of answer or response to avoid the interaction disappointment. So normally when testing VR, these are the kinds of things that you get. So you can have like one, really maybe fun. 2 stations set up at any given like 10 by 10 booth. And so normally you have all the local events that talk about local groups, but then there's the events themselves, which is like BostonFIG or PAX East or PAX West. And like a D&D actual conferences, like you can get around 100 people a day, like with a 5-minute demo. You're really never going to actually get that many, just because there's like minutes in between. But we've had thousands of people play our games at a lot of different conferences around the country. But what's nice about all that is you can see the physical faces, expressions, reactions, as well as the reactions of people watching them play. Just a lot of time. So there's like normally you get kind of all of that. But I'm an adult now. Before you can actually test the game, you have to make one. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about MIN. So it's an Oculus Launchpad project that Justin Palmer put together, and you can see him and Catherine presenting on demo day. Talking with Malden. So here's like a quick 1-minute thing about our game. Really excited about supporting BostonFIG. Small trailer. And they are currently offering us, and this was actually what was presented to get the funding for the Oculus Launchpad program. Run the fest, which is, so you can see you have a VR player who is now game-changing kind of offer for us, placing like saving the money, things to assist the other player to be able to get goals. So you think of it like collectathons back in the day. So you can think of like Banjo-Kazooie going around collecting a bunch of items, but you're doing it together and you're solving this puzzle together. And we are like striving to that when players do play through our game together, that they're going to come out with a stronger relationship between each other for having gone through and like solve this. So core tenets are simplicity, accessibility, exploration, problem solving, teamwork and collaboration, as well as nonviolence. So I didn't realize I have 10 minutes left, so I'm kind of go through. But after the art pass, so you saw earlier was one of our level blockouts. It ended up like looking like this. It's actually coming along beautifully, and we are working on the game. So the point being, you've made a game, it's awesome, you're ready to take it to conferences, you're ready to demo. But then there's a global pandemic, and all those places you're going to go to demo your game, to get feedback, are now no longer an option. To grow up as a so now that throws everyone into panic. The only option is remote testing, and the question is like, how do we even get testers? How do we communicate with them? So and the next question is, how do we watch them? So the simple answer to that is to just hit record. Unfortunately, it is not that easy and is not that simple, especially trying to record VR. But even recording like standard games, so I'm not even going to get into trying to record console. This was done on PC, and this is more about like what we did. But the strategies still apply and are the same. So first step is, let's go ahead and let's find some testers. So we put a lot of things out on social media, and we found that GIFs went out more than anything else. So you can see we went from just sharing a link to putting an image with a link to a GIF, and you'll see that like the one with the least amount of engagement is just sharing a link. By putting an image with the link, it did a whole lot better. You can see like basically 4 or 5 times better. And so we just met with the mayor of Malden on what's Thursday, interesting here is that the GIF in video, while it ended up getting less like overall impressions, you can see it actually had like 3 times more engagement, which is pretty insane. So I definitely recommend GIFs and videos while trying to go out and get testers and looking for them on socials. This is specifically on Twitter. So we had similar success on Facebook. But just remember that you can reach a whole lot of people and still like
Yeah.
all of these views that we had.
It's so
So you can
bizarre
see we
getting
reached
involved
over
with
like
things at this like city
12,500
and
on
government
Facebook
level,
and
which is all new for
like
me.
almost 1,200 on
Very, very new
Twitter
stuff.
on a given week,
Hey, gotta get the change
and
somehow.
like that resulted in 20 more testers. So it is going to be, it is hard. It is a long fight.
I'm very
but
excited about it.
At the end of the day, like
Me
it's
too.
also getting people to be aware of your game and giving them a place
It's
to
true.
go. So testing VR during a
It really
pandemic
has
is even
been.
harder.
It's been
And so
tough
while we
for
were marketing things
BostonFIG
on
too, because
Twitter,
like we needed to
we were
pivot
sending
into.
people to our
Hey, Jesse.
Discord. We had sign-up forms, so you want to keep those sign-up forms
So
simple.
far, so good.
So finding your audience, we use Twitter and Facebook
No,
for that.
please.
And then
You're
giving a
most
place to
welcome.
go was trying to funnel people into the Discord
I
because we
had
wanted
my
them
computer
to
on last
actively
night,
have
just
a back
like
and forth kind of
idling,
conversation
and
with us.
as I was
So the
falling
sign-up
asleep,
form
I
is,
was
you want
overhearing
that to be
like,
simple,
"Hello,
and then
I'm
the
Jesse Craig's bitch, and
next
welcome to my talk,"
step is
and I
getting
was
into the
like, "I'm gonna leave
instructions
Jesse
of setting
alone."
it up. So now we're getting into the real meat here. So you want your sign-up form to be simple, just an email and a name. Unfortunately, we had to break that ourselves because we use Oculus
stuff.
for sending things. We had to we needed their Oculus
Yeah.
email if they had an
Yeah.
Oculus email. If they're using Steam VR, then they
And
didn't
this
need to do
space
that.
is
So you can see this
persistent.
wasn't
I'm gonna
an
rework
optional
it a little
thing.
bit tonight to close down the purple and
And
blue
we
rooms, just so we
also
have a
wanted to set
standing green room for
expectations with them
tomorrow.
and make sure they knew that this was a
Yeah. Who
co-op
wants
game, so
those
they needed
colors?
someone else to play with on the same PC. So we had them check that.
It's
And
all
then
great.
the last one, we really didn't have to add in here, but we were curious, like, how did you hear about the
And
game?
then we're gonna
And
also
we
kind
actually
of
got a variety of
outfit the
answers that
space for
were
Game Loop
like
when we've got Game
meaningful,
Loop
but
to
I would
help with some of
definitely make
the
sure all these
more.
other things are optional.
Yeah, Game Loop's
You
gonna
only
be
want to take what
virtual.
you have needed.
And then
And so
I
that
was
was like
just
our
talking
sign-up
to
form.
Esther
So
about
the next
the
part
fact that
is
we're
the
probably
recording
actually gonna
setup,
do
which is
a
honestly the
both
hardest
virtual
part of
and
all of this.
in-person fest in the fall. So we're gonna have both.
So we ended up using OBS Studio, and this is what we recommended to all our playtesters. The Xbox game bar is something I feel like everyone forgets about, but it's literally two clicks to get recording going. And just like an FYI, I know a lot of people feel like you have to download like a recording tool if you're doing something on Android and iOS. I just wanted to kind of let you know that there are now built-in recording tools on newer Android devices, and iOS has always had a built-in recording tool. But Android does have its own built-in one now. You just kind of have to dig for it. So you're going to have to write an instruction on how to tell your users to do that if you're doing iOS or Android. But again, we focus on Windows.
Close to the front,
and part of like what made our game even more difficult to try and record is we had different sound systems for each player. So the VR player can hear different sounds than the local pancake players, was kind of what we call it.
So
and so you also have separate control systems happening at once. You have again VR player and the regular controller.
I think that
and then you have the cross platforms where they could be on OVR or Steam VR, and there's actually different setups we had to do for both of those. I'm only going to show you one.
So it'll be all
but the thing is that's why we ended up using OBS. Is it allowed us to send them what they need based on the needed, and it was just a few clicks. So I'll show you the video of like kind of what they had to do for that. But just key takeaways here is video is only the minimum of what you need. If you can get their voice and hear them talking, especially for our game, which is a puzzle game,
I'm just gonna make that
we really needed to be able to hear the players talking through the puzzles and communicating with each other to find out like what does or doesn't work. And one of the like key things we came out is they kept saying things like over here or here, or where are you? And that like them talking, like we wouldn't have known that without recording their voice, because that told us that we need to give them better tools to be able to communicate with each other.
Right.
And then if you can record like the facial expressions and body language and things like that, that's great. But it felt like a bit of an overreach to ask people to set up. But this is what the recording actually ended up looking like. So we had like the VR player that we could see, and the pancake player is on the big screen. So we were able to see both screens at once when we watched their recordings. So this is the setup that we gave. So we gave them a video on how to set up the recording.
Oh no, it's all set.
So this kind of explains the Oculus mirror, and then we go into kind of, once they have that, to open up OBS. So we had this JSON here, which gave them all the settings beforehand. So this was like the easy button to make it super easy for them to set up the two recordings. And that's what allowed us to have, you can see both screens are now set up. And it also put in like the mics. So we're able to basically put in the where the VR mic is, as well as like the standard PC mic. And feel free to ask me later if you would like to go through all this to kind of see exactly what we did. And I'm just going to keep going since we're almost at time here. But this whole like cycle that we went through with our testers is like, even one recording, we came back with 7 pages from the dev team, was the big thing here. And it was just a cycle of basically put out the latest build, have testers do it, get a bunch of feedback, put that into our backlog, and just start breaking away at bugs and like what are the top things that we want to fix between this and the next one. So the next question is, how were users uploading and submitting everything? So we use Google Drive, and I blacked out people's names for obvious reasons, but that allowed them to have their own individual place to upload it. And so like Google Drive has like a if you're worried about like limited capacity, so we cheated in that we paid for like to have the unlimited drive space, so it just doesn't matter how much gets uploaded or how big it is. So if you don't want to use Google, there are other things, but we gave each individual user, and this did take a lot of time to kind of do, their own place to set up that only they had access to. But if you want to use it, mega.inz is a really good way to ask users to send you files, because then they get 50 gigs of their own just for creating an account to be able to send you things, and you can download it and easily do it. So Residual Sync is this peer-to-peer type thing if you want to set that up with them. And then, of course, Dropbox, and then the last one down here is Proton Drive, which is like a new kind of more less privacy concerning version of Google Drive. We also had a playtester section in our Discord that they got their own special tags, let them feel part of the community, or they can go in and give us bug reports. So one of the unexpected things about this kind of playtest and going through the playtest is that because we gave them this Google Drive, the playtesters gave us a lot of additional things that we didn't expect. Some of them we even as far as to go through and like give us a step-by-step, like for each minute they played, gave us feedback for each individual section in their own like document with links to like sections in the video that they're referring to. So that's why this last one here, empower playtesters with tools, and they will deliver, and they'll give you more than you expected.
Yeah, it's possible.
But make sure you focus on the player, not the game. Record what you can, take lots of notes, and just notice that VR does need a lot more testing for a lot of reasons. And I just want to thank everyone for coming, and let me know if you have any questions at MinTheGame. You can follow us on Twitter if you'd like to know more. But I'd like to thank everyone for coming to this talk. So I will stop sharing and get ready for the next presenter. Thank you, everyone.